Hi everyone, Simon from Horoma Studio. Today I wanted to talk about references, which I think is kind of a under-discussed subject in the area of like archviz and more like artists in general, or at least the way I feel when I look at what's available on YouTube lately. And I wanted to address not necessarily right now how to use references in your work, because this is like a much bigger subject in itself and one that I actually take like almost a whole day in the masterclass that I'm running in order to sort of tackle it. So what I want to focus on today is more about like what kind of software I use, why like the whole theory behind how and why you should use references in your work, and how it sort of like looks like on a daily basis when you want to start using it in your daily job. So I'll walk you through basically the software that I use, why it's an interesting software to use, and how it's like pretty efficient at very basic stuff that we need on a daily basis. And then I'll try to show like very quick case studies of like how you can leverage the power of this software, and we'll have a quick like conclusion behind at the end of this. So yeah, let's get started. So the first big question that arises, why should I use references in my work? Because there's like this very big misconception, I think, that people tend to think that because they're using references, it will hinder the creativity of their work and the sort of like originality of their work. And while they can be true if you use references in a very poor way by just like picking a single one and copying everything from it and incorporating in your work, this becomes entirely untrue when you actually know how to use references and pick like what you need from several references and then start leveraging it into your own work. One thing I think that is very paramount to understand regarding references is that it helps in two ways actually. Is that, as I said, counterintuitively, it sort of helps creating like maximizing your creativity, and what it helps also is to maximize your productivity. And the funny thing is that these two concepts sort of like feed themselves, if I may say, because if you maximize your productivity, it means that you're going to have more time to dedicate to other tasks. And one thing that you can do with that extra time that you're having by basically maybe like automating stuff or having like a proper workflow, etc., that extra time that you get, you can dedicate it to actually trying more stuff in terms of creativity to the approach of the project you're dealing with. And the other thing that helps maximizing creativity with references is that instead of starting from scratch, every time you look at a project, you can gather all the references of stuff that might be relevant to what you're dealing with. And instead of starting from zero all the time, you're starting from all the knowledge that has been already built basically until now on the sort of subject that you're dealing with. So not only will you be able to save a lot of time but not having to iterate into stuff that have already been done, it will also give you a direction of what you can do and what you shouldn't do, because you know what will work and what will not work. And the whole thing is that then this very big boost in productivity that you have will help you in actually building your own style and building your own approach to the subject that you have by incorporating what has already been done. So not only are you not really copying what is out there, but you're sort of taking it to the next level and like making it bespoke or tailoring it to the project that you have. So this is, I think, a big mindset shift that people need to go through if they haven't done it yet, because I know that of course most artists do use references, but some I know are a bit reluctant to do so, is to very understand like how much it can take your work to the next level by properly leveraging the power of references. So now what I want to go to in terms of subject is to walk you through the tool that I use, which is a very interesting software called Eagle, and I'll show you kind of like how it works and how you can sort of leverage its power in order to have a proper way of dealing with references. So the software I want to talk to you about is called Eagle. You can find it at eagle.cool because it's a cool software, and it kind of looks like this. It's at first sight it doesn't look like quite special, but it does have very nifty, really useful small features that make it very different from other software that do similar tasks. One also very interesting thing is that you can see it can deal with many formats, which is very useful. So when you look at the way it looks for like, this is one of my libraries that I have. There are like, I'm just going to walk you through the couple of, or like different feature that I use that are very nice, I'd say, when it comes to like basically using it. One thing to understand first is that basically it's like a library system, so there's like a lot of tagging implied. It's very easy to use, and one thing for sure that I should mention right now and that I think is very nice is the fact that if you take any, like, I don't know, any website, there's a built-in plugin that lets you sort of save the image directly to Eagle and add tag, so that you can sort of use it really directly as you're like browsing through the internet and add stuff in your library very efficiently. And here you can see it's here with the tags that I just added. So this is one of the big things, is that the integration with basically what I do is that I spend a lot of time like looking on stuff on the internet, and it's always a pain in the ass to sort of save the thing manually, put it into your like bridge or whatever, and then have to sort of tag the thing, etc. So here you have like all the tagging that is almost done automatically because they have like suggestions. Also, one thing that is very nice is that when you use that that plugin, you have the link that can give you, like, send you back to the original URL that you've used or where you found the thing. And it's very efficient as well, because what it means is that you don't have to save like 10 images of the same project. You can just save a couple of them and have the URL and go back to the project very easily. One thing that is very nice, so as I was saying, is that there's like all this tagging system that is very easy to use and that you can sort of go through like very simple way of like filtering. You can use like if you want like union or intersection, etc. So it's very simple to use. And one thing that is fun also is that you can have this sort of very simple color filtering that is very efficient, and you have this sort of like accuracy here that helps you when you're like dealing with certain color palettes that you're looking for. Perhaps like if you want to have this night renderings or stuff like that, you can have like a lot of different palettes already that can be very fun to do and very fun to look at. Another thing that is quite fun as well is this idea of like simple dimension thing that is really helpful, because sometimes you can be looking for assets or like, I don't know, like references that have like a minimum or maximum pixel thing, because sometimes like your library will have like very low thumbnail resolution elements, and you won't be interested in them because what you want is like better assets that you can actually directly use in your compositing. So here you can have like a minimum of like 2000 pixels, and that way I know I can sort of use that into Photoshop very easily, or things like that. You have also stuff regarding the shape, so it means that you have also the sort of ratio that you're looking for, which is very interesting, because once you start understanding composition properly, you know that you can be looking for very specific format or ratio of your image in order to fit what you want in terms of requirements for your image. So here you have this sort of quick filter that will help you look for those specific aspects. There are like other stuff that I personally don't really use because it's like a little bit different, but the sort of type thing here, I know I don't really use it because it's just for reference purposes. The rating as well, as I don't really rate the image. I do add quite a bit of notes sometimes when I have like very specific image that I want to use later for another like purpose, or like a very specific idea that I had in mind and that I wouldn't be able to understand directly from the image. So that way I can add notes here, which is quite nice. And one thing also that is interesting is that you can build several libraries. So for instance, here, this is my reference library. I have another one that is just for post-production purposes, where I have like all my cutouts that are like organized here. One thing that I've noticed is that also what I like is that the loading of the thumbnail are extremely is very quick, even though I'm like all the library I have is on a simple HDD, so it wouldn't be that quick. So that's a very good thing. And if I go back here, so that's the sort of like whole thing. It's very simple. There's no like overly complicated things. One thing that is fun is this sort of random idea here, where it sort of like randomly throws at you references that sometimes can show you interesting stuff that you can play with in case you're kind of like not really looking for something specific. But overall, what is more interesting is like the tagging system that is very straightforward and very efficient. What I'll do right now is to sort of walk you through how I tag the images and how I use it, so that you can maybe better understand like the sort of like system that I personally use, and maybe you might want to copy it or adapt to your needs. So let's have a look at that now. When it comes to tagging, I think there are like two main schools, or maybe others as well, but one is going to be like this idea of like tagging as much as possible the image in order to get as precise as possible results of research. And another that I kind of tend more to is more this idea of like having very broad categories, and sort of like have to still scroll through quite many images in the end, but still like filtering properly what you want to go through. What I like with this idea of having something a little bit broader is that it has, or it retains, this sort of like serendipitous idea of like you can come across an image that will inspire you, that sort of fits your requirement, but that is not exactly what you were looking for at first. So it sort of gives this extra potential of creativity and originality that I quite like. What I would do, basically what I have in terms of tags is I have very broad ones that will be related to very simple things such as exterior or interior. So if I look at so they're pretty, straightforward. So all the exterior shots that I have, or if it's interior shots, because sometimes I really just need this idea of like having stuff related to indoor, outdoor space in order to see a little what's happening. What I can also have is like broader categories, such as basically I have one regarding lighting. So here basically I will have stuff regarding interesting lights or lighting effect, or like atmospheres in general, that I want to retain because I think they could be potentially interesting. Another subject that I have is more related to framing. Here it's more like really directly the sort of like way the camera is placed, how the building or the subject is placed in the image, the type of foreground, etc. So I will have very different reasons why the image can end up in this tag, but still there are like interesting things that is happening, and that sort of like make me potentially orientate the way I will frame a subject if I can see that it sort of fits the project I'm working on. One final thing that is very interesting as well is the color palette. So here I will have like save stuff where the color palette is interesting, and so that I can sort of really simply copy colors that seem to work together properly and that could work with my project. So for instance, I can look for stuff where there's like a very simple daylight system, and I want to have like more natural colors. So I will look for specific images that have this sort of feeling where the sort of blue and green work together in a nicely way. Otherwise, I can have stuff more related to like snow, whatever, or nighttime renderings or nighttime photographs. One thing that I didn't mention, but that you can notice, is that you shouldn't limit yourself to photographs or renderings. I would actually say I would avoid renderings as much as possible, even though sometimes they're nice, because they're already an interpretation of reality. So paintings are very nice as well, because there's always a very strong work on lighting and texture and the sort of like color palette as well. So I do have quite many of those in my reference folder, as you can see here. Then there are like subcategories that are a little bit more special, such as like props, where basically it's like this idea of, it's a bit boring to sort of think of like how you want to add like little items in your image when you're doing interiors, because I personally am not an interior designer, so it would be stupid of me to spend time trying to do very bespoke things when I can actually find arrangement that works and sort of then bespoke or like tailor them for the scene that I'm working on. But starting from scratch would be a huge waste of time. So here I have different organization or like ideas of styles that I can work with and use as a base in order to start from, because And then I can sort of like refine if I want this to be sort of like office related or home related or school related or etc. So this is a very simple yet very efficient way of like narrowing research. Then occasionally I will have tags related to programs, because I tend to work quite a bit on some specific programs on a daily basis. So I start like accumulating references right for that program in order to sometimes have, when you're kind of out of ideas of how to animate your image, or sometimes you do have to make some small design decisions because the architect can't know or design or think of all the small details, and having references of like actually built project can help you in having a sort of like really real way of proposing design solutions. And also here, so it helps in having like ideas of animation and stuff that could be happening in a school basically, or like props that you could have in terms of references. So this is, I think, very, very important to have. Of course, you can also have, sometimes I have like personal photographs, because I do like to take photos every now and then when I'm out. So every now and then I'll have like my own photographs in there that can help, because they sort of like also have a better connection to experience, because most of these buildings, of course, I haven't visited them. Some of them I know and I have visited them, so I have a better understanding of how I can sort of convey differently what's in the photograph. But sometimes I really have to rely just on what's in the photograph, which is a little bit different. As I was saying earlier, you can use this for like different purpose. Here I'm really talking about references, but you can also use it for like cutouts and your like basically compositing stuff. Here I have like a lot of skies and things like that, or small effects that I can use. So these are like stuff that you can also drag and drop directly into Photoshop or whatever you're using, and use as a really like good way of organizing your library in a more general term. So just some very quick case studies of examples in order to show you how this can work, and how having this sort of very broad way of tagging is actually enough in order to find solutions to like the IDs you need. Let's say I was working on, as I was saying earlier, looking on interiors and trying to gather IDs of props that I can use. So as I was saying, I would go with my props arrangement and maybe interior shots here. And what I would do then is just to have like the intersection of these two. And here I would have stuff that would be interesting for like interior shot of like props references. I could also potentially add like an office thing, and that way I have like props of interior stuff related to offices. So here I can use any of those that would fit the requirement. And this can be related to, as I was saying, like props or things like that, but it can also be related to other things if I need. For instance, I could have like maybe the intersection of like office space and lighting. So that way I would have like ideas of like different types of lighting related to office space. So here you have this sort of like interesting artificial lighting from outside, etc., that can be giving you like other IDs already that you can work with. One thing that is fun as well that I use often is that when I have like aerial views to do, because they are quite very special, or sometimes it's just the act of looking at aerial views that sort of make you understand that aerial views might be an interesting idea for your project and the type of thing you're trying to show in your image. So here I have like some of the potential aerial views that could be used as references, or like either very broadly or very like narrowly, depending on if I want to copy the whole scene, as in like the lighting and the framing, or just the framing, or just maybe a more like way of like camera height or things like that. In the same way, maybe I would be looking for like details of interior stuff, or like more architecture thing that could be quite interesting when sometimes you want to add like small details of like textures or architectural elements, etc. That's always a nice thing to have when you want to have the sort of like small things that you can add, or like when you want to actually understand technical details and how you can sort of model them. One last example that I can go through quickly would be also regarding, maybe as I was saying, like this idea of working on lighting, and maybe from light you can start also adding maybe this idea of like, if I had like an exterior rendering and I would be looking for references for different types of lighting, I would have all these images that would come to me. That would be a good base start for all the typologies of light that could be potentially explored. So you can see there's like different types of contrast, different types of overall atmosphere basically, and this gives like a nice base to start from and sort of like orientate your research and process. So I won't go through all the sort of combination that can be done with all the tags that I have, but basically the whole idea here is to give you a sort of overview of what can be done with this very simple and efficient software and how you can sort of integrate that into your daily workflow, and why, or understand like better how this can boost your creativity by having things properly tagged in a very easy way rather than a very cumbersome manual way of doing it. So that's it for the video. As I said, I really wanted to just show you like the broad range of like why it is important to have references and how to like why it's important to use them, how you can quickly sort of use them with Eagle, and how this software seems to be very simple to use compared with other similar software, and like how you can maybe quickly and efficiently integrate it into your workflow. Of course, like the structure that I showed is kind of like, I think I'll keep it because I like this idea of keeping something very broad, but it's always subject to evolution, and also it's very personal way of working. So if you have nothing right now, I would really suggest you to start building that library and maybe use the type of tags, very broad ones that I have, so that you start from somewhere. And if you already have like a very efficient way of tagging that is different than mine, I would be actually very curious to hear about it and see how potentially I could enhance mine by integrating some of your ideas and vice versa. As I was saying, the topic of references is a very big topic. How to use them is a very important way of like how you can become more creative and find your own style, if I may say. This is something that I address more extensively in the composition masterclass that I've been running for a bit now, and that will have a next cohort very soon. So feel free to check out the landing page. I'll put the link in the description if you want to check it out and see all the other topics that I talk about. But reference management is part of like a big chunk of it. And that'll be it with the video. I hope you've enjoyed the content and find some valuable information, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.